Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
We need to roll back the state. We spy on all of our own citizens. Our prisons are flooded with nonviolent drug offenders. If you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now. Every single one of these problems are a result of government being way too big.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Gas Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. Thanks for joining us. As always, I am Dave Smith, and he is the king of the cocks, COVID Jesus, Robbie the Fire Bernstein, coming to you from what looks like a new location, but I think he just moved to a different corner. How are you, sir?
I want to show off all the books I haven't read and how good I am when sitting in a comfortable chair. Look at these arms no one ever gets to see.
But it is true. Yeah, it's true. You do look a little bit like, I feel like you're out alphaing me on this episode. You know what I mean? You're just like,
King
really,
of the
Dave?
podcast.
Do you want to take on me with all these books behind me? You're not just taking on me. You're taking on all of these books and these arms. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's a bit much. That's a bit much. Well, me and Rob are psyched up because it is the 28th today. We're in the last few days of 2023. We're getting ready to go into what is sure to be a wild 2024. But before we do that, before we go into the year 2024, me and Rob are going to close out 2023 in style over in East Rutherford, New Jersey, for a crazy night, live stand-up comedy show, a live Part of the Problem podcast, and an after party where we're all going to be hanging out. It's going to be a great night. Really looking forward to it. Come on out. East Rutherford is real easy to get to from New York City as well. So if you're in Jersey, if you're in New York City, if you're anywhere close, come on out. There are a select few tickets still available. It's going to be at the Williams Center. That's the venue. You can go on over to comicdavesmith.com and grab tickets there. And then me and Rob will be coming all over the place in 2024 together. Rob will be doing some of his own shows too. You can find those ticket links over at robbiethefire.com. And of course, check out Run Your Mouth, Rob's other podcast. All right. So there's several interesting stories that are floating around today that I thought we could have some fun talking about. Nikki Haley, our favorite lady war pig, is she's getting in trouble for some remarks that she made. It's really just everything about this story is just wonderful and hilarious. I don't think too many, besides Vivek Ramaswamy, I haven't seen anyone actually get the right take on this. But not to say no one else has, I just haven't seen it. But she's getting a lot of heat from the corporate press, who generally tends to like Nikki Haley. But this was a question she was asked at a campaign event recently. Let's play the video.
Please, what was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was? I'm sorry?
I'm not ready to president. I want to see your view on the cause of the Civil War.
I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so that individuals have the liberties so that they can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way.
Thank you. And in the year 2023, it's astonishing to me that you answer that question without mentioning the word slavery.
What do you want me to say about slavery? Next question.
Okay, so that's just the moment there. So now, of course, the corporate press's angle on this is that she didn't mention slavery. The same problem this guy has, that she didn't mention slavery. So that's their issue. So they're like, hey, Nikki Haley, like, look, we love the way you'll sell any war we tell you to sell, but you also have to sell the idea that racism is the biggest problem ever. And so, like, that's why they're all mad at her. But what the real story here, which Vivek Ramaswamy roasted her on Twitter for, and he just posted his clip of, remember when he called her out in the debate and said, I bet she can't name 3 provinces in Ukraine. And she just couldn't or didn't. And we all know couldn't. He just posted that clip again and was like, yeah, look, the point he was making, I forget exactly what he said, but the point he was making is that the real story here, and what's interesting about this little moment is just that she knows nothing. That's all. She just knows nothing. And this is something that I think people really underestimate. How much these, and that's why she's just caught in this moment where it's like, look, she's got her canned answers for what are the expected canned questions of today, right? Like if you were to ask her something about, how do you feel about Joe Biden's immigration policy? She's got a line ready for you. Well, I just think we have to protect the borders and blah, 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 whatever. If you ask her about the war in Israel, we will stand with Israel till the end because Hamas is Al-Qaeda and we blah, whatever. Like she's got her canned answers, but you just throw her like a very basic history question. What are your thoughts on the Civil War? What do you think led to that whole big war we had back then in the 1800s? And she's like, government and the role of government. That's what it was about. And it's just like, it's stunning how little these people know. That's my takeaway from this whole thing. And I do find that to be very interesting.
Firstly, I don't know why, but she looks like John Kerry on a hunting trip. But also, I'm a very poor student of history. There's a lot of things I don't know. And you can give an answer to the cause of the Civil War without, giving Lincoln the credit for freeing the slaves and going, it was about preserving the Union. But you at least have to say that. Whatever the hell and by the way, you're trying to sell war. So the Civil War should be great for you. The Civil War is proof of why sometimes it's worth taking up arms. And even though we had to fight our own country, we were able to free the slaves and move forward as a better society. Boom.
Look,
easy. How do you flub that one?
It's unbelievable, right? Like how easy this would be. But I think this is, I may have gone on a rant like something similar like this a few episodes back. So forgive me if I did, because it's a kind of similar thing. But I think it's worth repeating because I think it's really important to understanding this whole thing. And I've had a little bit more insight into this than the average citizen of this country, because for whatever reason, being who I am, I've done a lot of shows on cable news, and I've met a few handfuls of politicians, and through the years, particularly when I worked for SE Cup, I was in there like 3 days a week or whatever. And you'd just be in CNN and, like in the green rooms and stuff. And you'd meet all the people, like who'd just be hanging out. And the people would be the anchors and then their panelists. And then it would be whoever the guests of the day were, it'd be random congressmen or senators or whoever, or people on their staffs and all these types of people. And I think when I was talking about this, and I think I might have gone on a somewhat similar rant, was when we played that video, that Liam from the Gray Zone posted, where he's stopping all of these congressmen and asking them what they think about how it was Netanyahu's strategy to prop up Hamas for years. And all of them, every single one of them to a man, has never heard of this. They have no idea what you're talking about. It's just like, what? Like, where did this report come from? I'd like to see this report, And you're like, it's all over. Like, do you not read the newspapers? Like, this is kind of crazy. And the answer is that, yeah, they don't. I remember, I've said this before on the show, but I remember when I was on SE Cup show, and for those of you who don't know, this was years ago, maybe like 6-7 years ago or something like that. I was a contributor for SE Cup, who, was a CNN anchor. I was a contributor on her show. And I got the gig because Andy Levy was her co-host, and he had worked at Red Eye, which was the late night Fox News show that I used to do regularly before it got canceled. Anyway, so I was a contributor there, and I would always go off on these arguments, and I had some cool viral moments there. It was a good gig for me for a little bit. And then for some reason they didn't renew my contract. Anyway, it must have been an oversight. I'm sure they just forgot to, Rob. SE Cup, who by the way was always nothing but a cool person to me, but she never said this to me. But I got the vibe of being there. And I know, and I totally understand this from her perspective, where it's like I would just make, like, I'd do what I do, and I'd make some real compelling points about whatever the issue of the day was. One of the big ones was the war in Syria at the time. And she would just kind of have this thing, and she didn't say this, but she just kind of have this thing where it's like, Dave, I just got off the phone with Dick Cheney's chief of staff. I had a meeting with the head of the Senate Arms Committee yesterday, you know, and you're telling me this comedian is right and all of them are wrong, you know? And I will grant that does sound ridiculous. Like, and that would always kind of be my attitude. Again, none of this was ever said, but I'm just like, it was just this kind of like vibe, and that I have to kind of be like, yeah, I get where that does sound wrong. Like, it does sound like the head of the Senate Arms Committee should probably know a little bit more than some dickhead comedian about this topic. But he doesn't. And I'm actually right, and he's wrong. And that was kind of like the whole thing. And it does, on some way, you're like, this makes no sense, right? Until you really think about it and you realize that it's like, look, me and you both, Rob, kind of have a similar kind of path where, for whatever reason, we got really interested in these topics that we talk about before we were doing a podcast together. We just got interested in them. And this is how we've told the story on the show before, but this is how me and Rob were friends who were just doing stand-up comedy together. And then like one day Rob comes in with David Stockman's 1,000-page book. And I'm like, and he goes, dude, you ever heard of this David Stockman guy? And I was like, heard of David Stockman? I was like, dude, that book's amazing. And like, and there's something about where it was like, it's not just like you happen to come in with some little book that like, I was like, oh, that's one of my like favorite books. It's like, if you've seen The Great Deformation, it's a monster of dense reading, you know? And I was like, oh, you're like really interested in this shit. You got to be really interested to read that book, which is fantastic, by the way. But anyway, so we just kind of like were really interested in reading about all this stuff. And then we do the show together, and we do a show 3 days a week. So we keep up with the news. That's our job, is to know what's going on. And you kind of feel like on some level, you're like, yeah, but isn't that a governor who's running for president? Isn't that her job to know what's going on? And the answer is no, it's not. Her job is not to know what's going on. Her job is to be shaking hands and kissing babies and holding rallies and raising money and talking to donors and saying all the things that donors want to hear and sucking up to the corporate media. She has a totally different job. That's not what the job is. The people in the Congress aren't sitting around consuming everything they can and reading about all this shit like we are. They're just not. And so it actually turns out that when you stop and this is why Liam's video was so great, when you stop and ask a bunch of congressmen, what do you think about Netanyahu's stated strategy of propping up Hamas? They go, I'm sorry, what? I'm unaware this is a thing. If you ask Nikki Haley, hey, how do you think the Civil War started? Yeah. Government, how we live our lives. What do you think? Right? That's her response. How do you think the Civil War started? And his answer, by the way, is just so great. I'm not running for president. Like, what? Give me your take on it. But so it just, I don't know. I thought it was a great little moment. And that's why Vivek Ramaswamy that was why it was so great when he called her out for not being able to name, and you probably can't name a province in Eastern Ukraine that you're saying we got to fight a war for, right? Because Vivek is a different character, right? Vivek is a guy who's like brilliant, clearly brilliant, who's made himself worth hundreds of millions of dollars as a very young man. And he's like, oh, I take an interest in this stuff. If you read any of Vivek Ramaswamy's books, you can tell, you're like, oh, this guy is reading everything. He's doing it because he wants to do it, not necessarily because that was his job. But still, he's the guy who is doing that. However you feel about Vivek Ramaswamy, whether you're sold on him or not, whether you like some of the stuff he says and don't like some of the other stuff, there's no question when you listen to Vivek Ramaswamy speak, you're like, this guy has read books. He's read books about this topic. He can speak to you at length and know something about the topic. RFK has read books. However you feel about him, he's read it. There is not another presidential candidate at least in the Democrats and the Republicans, I should say. Michael Rechtenwald has read books. He's written books that, none of the other ones on the Democrats or the Republicans ever demonstrate that they read at all. I always say, Trump's watched a show about it. I get that from him, He's like, I checked out Tucker last night. But you never get the feeling that Trump's read a book about the history of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Because he hasn't. And anyway, it's shocking to a lot of people to actually imagine how little these people know. But that's the reality of it.
This is almost like a Kamala Harris moment of, well, there was civil and war, and sometimes you have to fight war to protect the civility, which is what you want as a citizen.
Kamala Harris is a whole different level, though, man. It really is. Like, I don't know what explains it, but like there's a factor with Kamala Harris that I'm not sure what it is. There's something missing to my understanding of how stupid she sounds. Like, I'm serious. Like, I don't know if she has like an anxiety disorder, and so she has to eat like 100 milligrams of THC and just take like strong edibles, because that's what it sounds like. It sounds like the way someone who like took way too many edibles and are now like sinking into their chair, and then you were to like ask them a question about like, oh, why do you think it's important that we keep funding NASA? And she's like, the space is out there, and out there is space, and if the space out there is like this, the space in here, then we're all part of the same space. And you're like, yo, what planet are you on right now, lady? This is just like something's going on there. I don't know if it's pills or what, but something. I don't know if she was kicked in the head by a horse. I'm just saying there is some element that I'm not aware of that will explain that. If we were aware of it, we'd go, oh, that's why she talks like that.
This Nikki Haley video is exceptional, though, because I ignored the headline because I just assumed that she said that it was about preserving the union, and that the woke media was upset about that because everything's got to be the identitarian politics. So I did not even click on the article. I just assumed it was that. And I was like, all right, I bet she got this one right. And then you play the video, and the follow-up question from that guy should almost be, are you familiar with the Civil War?
1861 through 1865? Anything ring a bell in that period? I'll give you a hint. Abraham Lincoln. He was a pretty big player in it. Yeah, I mean, it's like, forget even like getting into like, well, you could, I mean, honestly, like, and whatever. I mean, I'm a little bit more of a student of history on some of these things, but like, I mean, I could like, if someone asked me about that, I could, and I don't have like as clear cut of a strong opinion as some people, but I'd be like, well, there's really interesting books written on this side, and like there are people who view it as a war of northern aggression, and yes, the South was certainly clinging to slavery and probably would not have given it up if it wasn't for the war, but at the same time they did have a constitutional right to secede, and there was really no justification to attack the South for the crime of seceding from the Union. And the North also had slavery at the time, mind you. Also, Lincoln conscripted an army to fight against the South, kind of enslaved all of those people. So there's just a lot of interesting stuff about the Civil War, and I'm far from any expert on it, but I could easily give you a few sentences of an answer about what I think about it. And it's just so like, it's unbelievable that this was the best, I wouldn't say leading presidential candidate, but let's say like the establishment's leading presidential candidate. That's what they have to offer. But, look at who the current president is right now. So I guess it's probably better than what Joe Biden would have told you a story about how kids used to stick the hair on his legs down and wait for it to pop back up or something like that. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Entera Skincare. What do you get when you combine a biomedical engineer, martial arts, and a distinct frustration with the skincare products currently on the market? Well, the answer is Entera Skincare. Their founder, Nick Andrews, is a biochemical engineer by training, a former pharmaceutical industry maven, and an enjoyer of martial arts. And he often found that his skin was worn and bad shape after contact with the mats as well as his sparring partners. Moreover, the few products out there that worked well had side effects he wasn't willing to put up with. He knew there had to be a better way. Nick took his biochemical engineering knowledge and insatiable appetite to build the better mousetrap and became his own product development specialist. A few years later, Entera Skincare was born. Entera Skincare's mission is to revolutionize the skincare and hair regrowth industry by offering cutting-edge, scientifically advanced products that deliver real, tangible results. They provide their customers with the most effective solutions for skincare and hair regrowth needs, backed by rigorous research and development. The team at Entera strives to empower individuals to feel confident, beautiful, and rejuvenated, embracing their unique skin through their luxurious and innovative product range. The new line this holiday season aims to enhance your daily skincare routine and support your skin's aging. The Ageless Bundle isn't just about skincare products, it's an investment in a skincare transformation. Unleash the potential of your enhanced skin by reducing the signs of aging and radiate timeless beauty like never before. Order your Ageless Bundle now and embark on a journey to age-defying radiance and confidence today. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to transform your skincare routine. Use promo code PROBLEM for 10% off at checkout. That's promo code PROBLEM for 10% off at checkout when you go to enteraskincare.com. enteraskincare.com, promo code PROBLEM for 10% off. All right, let's get back into the show. All right, let's move on to a serious topic that I think this is a big deal and I think is going to have major repercussions for the 2024 election. And this is the border crisis here in the United States of America, which we probably, we've talked a decent amount about, but probably have not talked about enough because this is really something. I mean, we've had this crisis has been going on for a long time now, but under Joe Biden, it has really exploded. If you look at the numbers, they're truly staggering. Here, let's play the video that we have on this latest caravan. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted you guys to get the visual of it. It's actually, by the way, the tweet that we put up there, I'm pretty sure End Wokeness got this wrong because he said over 730,000 illegals have invaded since October 1st. Okay. Actually, you know what? Forget that. I thought he was quoting the border apprehensions number. Maybe he did get that right. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check. But this is just in this one caravan, and they're saying this is the biggest one. It seems to be in the tens of thousands of people who are just coming over. And there are a lot of questions that start to get raised about the level of coordination when you have numbers like this. Like, this isn't just like, oh, countries are kind of bad down there, and so a bunch of there's like these migration patterns. This is like one big giant caravan coming up, and this has happened over and over again. This is the biggest one, I believe. But when you go down there, as several people have gone down to the border and have done reporting on this, they're finding Chinese nationals who are coming over. They're finding all types of African refugees who are coming over. There's something very fishy going on. I'd love if anyone has any good like reporting on where, like, if there's any like money that can be traced and where it's coming from to all of this. I'd be very interested to see that because this just feels completely inorganic. And that's just one thing. But I got to say, man, and this is one of the reasons why I'm really happy that Michael Rechtenwald is running for president on the Libertarian Party this year, because it's not just to libertarians, but just to people in general. But I don't get how at this point anybody can just be like, yeah, this is insane. This is just like, this is national suicide. Like, you can't just have zero control over who comes into your country and people are just pouring in, and they're just left to, like, even from like the libertarian, and this is why I was saying I'm happy Michael Rechtenwald is running, because like the goofy open borders libertarians, man, like that is such, all anyone has to do is look at that and then you go, I'm for open borders, and they go, no. you're disqualified. Like, I don't, and also I don't want to hear anything else you have to say. If your answer to this is just let them all in, they all have a right to come in. And then and on top of that, first off, that alone is disqualifying. But then on top of that, and you're going to be like, and I'm a libertarian. And you're like, well, what do you think's happening with these people as soon as they come in? Why do you think the mayors of Chicago and New York and all these other sanctuary cities are so outraged, so up in arms over this? Because as soon as they come in, they're not, well, where are they going? Okay, they need housing. You think they just have housing ready for them? You think this caravan no, they're going to need government housing. They're going to need to be fed by the government. They're going to need all types of services. Like where all of these people, okay, coming in here right now, where are they getting medical treatment from if one of them's injured? And the truth is that we are an advanced moral society. And the reality is just that whether you like it or not, under the current system that we live in, and me and you do not like this, but it is a totally overregulated big government country. And that means that it's not just easy for private charity to come in and take over and say, oh, we'll offer free medical care to these people. It's like there's tons of red tape you have to get through before that. And the truth is that they can go to emergency rooms. All of them can go to emergency rooms, and we're just not, we're not going to kick them out. We're just not going to do that. That's all going to be picked up by the taxpayer. But even more importantly than any of that, that's just kind of the reality of the consequences of this. I don't understand. And obviously, for people who have been listening to the show for a long time, I've gotten more and more away from this over the years. But if you ever have, I don't know if any of you guys have ever had, like, maybe you have your political view that changes and you change your mind about something. And then like years later, you're looking back on it and you're like, how did I ever not have this view? Like, how did I ever believe what I used to believe? It's almost like kind of lost to me. But why do these people just have a right to come here? Like, where does that right come from? These are uninvited. This is an uninvited caravan of people. Nobody asked them to come up here. This is not their country. They have not been here. They don't own anything here. They haven't been paying in taxes here. They have no claim to come here. And it's really something that as a country, we can't just muster up the political will to just be like, hey, sorry, no. And just let it be known. Like, gotta turn away. Sorry. We can't, we have so many of our own problems in this country. We cannot afford to just take in as many people as want to come here. It's madness. Anyway, any thoughts, Rob?
I think there's an odd lack of coverage for everything that you kind of hear about the border. I mean, look at the way that they covered COVID. Look at the way that they covered the Ukraine war, the Gaza war now. It's odd that the only real verification of the fact that there's magnitudes of non-Americans coming over the border is that RFK Jr. went down there and he's like, I went to the border and this is not just people from South America. Or you'll see random videos on Twitter of people going down to the border, throwing their phones in people's faces and going, hey, where are you from? Or you get random journalists going, hey, I was on an airplane and it looks like these are non-Americans from Africa. It's odd to me that Fox News isn't down there 24/7 and reporting on, like, I don't know why there isn't constant visuals of people coming across illegally and who they are, where they're going. Also with our obsession with national security and terrorism, that there isn't an obsession over how many non-Mexicans are pouring over our border and potential terrorist cells, which I'm not saying is happening. I'm just saying from the vantage point of the people obsessed with those topics, I'm surprised that's not more of a concern. And where I get a little bit conspiratorial, and I can't back this up, is, you know, they brought myocarditis in front of Congress 1,000 times, who refuses to say it's an emergency. And then I was covering this. You guys can go check out.
Who did they bring in?
Mayorkas. I just call him myocarditis.
Myocarditis. That is pretty funny. Okay. Yeah. I get it now.
1,000 times he gets it. It's not a crisis. It's not an emergency. And I cover this part 3. You can check it out in my end of year thing, that they actually were paying to store the border wall instead of putting it up. And then they sold it for pennies on the dollars because otherwise they would be forced to put it up.
I think you actually told me about this. Yeah, it's really interesting.
And then later,
such a government program.
Right.
It's just unbelievable.
And then later admitted to the fact that they were going to need a border wall. And then, of course, I made fun of this in my end of year thing, but Biden got rid of the border wall because he said it's not a serious policy solution. But then look at the amount of money we've spent in Ukraine versus the cost of completing a border wall. There's something very sketchy where it nearly seems intentional. And like the Biden administration has done everything it can to, for some reason, want to import people from South America. And that's also just a fringe conspiracy theory, the best of which is basically people saying they want to bring in people from other countries because in late stage governments, when they fail, and there were videos of even Democrats saying, hey, we might need to do military recruitment to these people that have come into our country because our own citizens don't want to serve in our military, which, we're now in fringe conspiracy space, and it's not widely reported on, but that's the end of empires, is when you can't bribe your own citizens to enforce laws that, everyone would be against. So you end up with basically a foreign military that has no allegiance to the neighbors or the local civilization. And so you're able to more easily pay them to be your military force.
Dude,
as you go full dictatorship.
If you read about, like in World War I, which is basically a whole bunch of late stage empires, right? Like a whole bunch of empires going to war, and many of them dying. And they were like, they would take like their African and Middle Eastern colonies and just make them fight in the war. And like, it's so crazy when you think about it. Like, just like try to imagine just being like some Arab in a village somewhere. And then you're just like plucked up and forced to go in the middle of this fucking war in Europe. It's like, just, you have no idea which side is which. You don't speak their language. You don't have their customs. They're just like, shoot over there, shoot at that. Those guys, like, it's wild. Look, something's going on here. This is done by design. What exactly that is up for interpretation. But this is something that, of course, this is Murray Rothbard said one of the things, it was in Nations by Consent, great piece by the libertarian goat, Murray Rothbard. He was talking about how one of the things that made him start to re-question the idea of like easy immigration policies was reading about how Stalin would flood ethnic Russians into like the Soviet satellite countries. Like he'd flood ethnic Russians into Estonia. You know what I mean? And it was intentionally done to kind of break up the national sovereignty of that country, to break up their camaraderie and their national identity. And look, I do think that there's something, there's a very reasonable point that people like Tucker Carlson will make when he's just saying, like, he goes, guys, it's like you're radically remaking the demographics of this country in a crazy way, in a crazy short period of time. And this is going to lead to something very bad. And I think that, first of all, when people say things like that, it triggers all of the alarm bells in every woke progressive's ears, because all of a sudden they're like, well, what do you mean demographics? Are you saying that non-white people are worse than white people or something like that? And then there will be the goofy libertarian types who like almost live purely in theory, but don't apply any of what's actually in front of their eyes to it. And so they'll kind of be like, well, skin color doesn't matter. It's ideas that matter. And it's blah, blah, blah. And there's been panic about immigration before. So why should we panic about it now? And it's like, okay, fine. But there's also lots of other factors that were there before that aren't there now. Like, it's not the same thing. The country isn't the same country as it was in 1890, if you haven't noticed. And the idea that like when you have created such like a racial grievance culture, then changing the racial dynamics matters a lot more, because then you have a welfare state and a racial grievance culture. So you're welcoming these people in. You're saying, we'll cover everything for you. Oh, by the way, all of your problems are white people's fault. welcome to America. like, okay, this isn't a recipe for anything good. It's also pretty remarkable to see how much Trump has been vindicated.
Yeah.
On this issue that was the central issue of his 2016 campaign. And I know we're all supposed to forget because this was like, I mean, look, we're going 8 current things ago that this was the current thing. But the entire progressive establishment just lambasted him for the nerve of saying that we need strict border control, and how racist that was, and how horrible that was, and how inhumane that was. And now all of these mayors in blue cities are sounding like a bunch of Trumpsters. And like, we're all supposed to not notice that they did a complete 180 on what was their biggest moral outrage of 2016, 17, 18, it's just very, very bizarre.
Yeah. And they have the problem of, and it's what I've been talking about a little bit on the show recently, is just contending with reality. And so if were a liberal mayor living in New York, it was supposed to be an easy thing to go, hey, have some compassion for these people. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they keep throwing the people at your doorstep and you're like, oh, you are bankrupting my state, and I can no longer pay for the civil, the things that I need of cops or whatever else. For
I got a re-election coming up. Right, exactly. Oh, all of a sudden, it actually is an issue. Yeah, no, that's right. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Moink. Moink is a fantastic company. You've got to check them out. They deliver grass-fed and grass-finished beef, lamb, pork, chicken, sustainably wild-caught Alaskan salmon, all straight to your door. Moink farmers farm like our grandparents did, and as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should because the family farm does it better. The Moink difference is a difference you can taste, and you can feel good knowing you're helping family farms stay financially independent too. You choose the meat delivered in every box. Choose from ribeyes, chicken breast, pork chops, salmon fillets, and much more. Plus, you can cancel anytime. I got to tell you guys, you got to check this out. My wife insists, and she's right, that we only have like the grass-finished, grass-fed beef, and you go to the supermarket and there'll be like a couple options and it doesn't even taste that good. But I'm telling you, the meat from Moink, it's incredible. You got to check it out. Jamie Siminoff, the founder of Ring Doorbell, he jumped at the chance to invest in Moink. Go check it out. You'll understand why. Keep American farmers going by signing up today at moinkbox.com/POTP. And right now, if you do that, our listeners get free ground beef for a year. That's 1 year of the best ground beef you'll ever taste, but for a limited time only. So go on over to moinkbox.com. That's moinkbox.com/POTP. All right, let's get back into the show. Anyway, this is kind of on topic, but you sent this video, Rob, which I missed. I do not watch MSNBC anymore the way I used to. I used to really be up on MSNBC. And so I found this video actually kind of interesting because Chris Matthews was, he was kind of the head guy. Well, maybe not the head guy. I mean, they had a few other big players there, but he was kind of like the elder statesman of the MSNBC world. Like Brokaw was the NBC kind of elder statesman guy. But Chris Matthews was kind of the old dog at MSNBC. So this was kind of interesting to see. So Rob, you sent me this clip the other day. Let's play this. Chris Matthews, who got Me Too'd out of his show, but I guess is on good enough terms that he can still come back now and.
Oh, what was his Me Too? I don't even remember this.
It was something about it was like not a horrible one. It was like making women feel inappropriate or something. Yeah, Chris Matthews, an old Irish drunk, and if a chick comes into his green room, he's gonna be like, "Nice ass, toots. Let's get out there and do some news." Anyway, but here's Chris Matthews.
It's very tough because people that didn't go to college have a pretty good rage on their hands. That's what you really want in an election is a rage. It can be black rage or white rage or rural rage. In this case, it's rural rage. They are so angry at the liberal establishment, the coastal elite. They look at people on television, they say, oh, those people on Saturday Night Live, those snarling rich kids, I know who they are. They're all trust funders. They don't have to worry about us. And the regular guy in the country goes, there they are snarling and making fun of us again. And every time we make fun of Trump, we're making fun of them. That's the weird, it's a weird thing. but in a way it's like fighting terrorism. I mean, we think we just put the army in, or Israel just puts the IDF in, they're going to solve the problem. It never solves the problem because you enrage people. And we did it with Afghanistan and we did it with Iraq. We enraged the enemy to the point where they're more fiery than ever and they hate us more than ever. Armies don't make peace.
Got to give credit where credit's due. And it's not too often that someone says the truth on MSNBC, but there it was with Chris Matthews. And look, I think the immigration point that we were just making is that just plays one more element into that. Just one more element of like, yeah, look, you all like called this idea horrible and racist, but none of you guys are calling Eric Adams horrible and racist right now. Why is that? It's like, oh, because, well, I guess you can't really deny he's got a point. So anyway, so this reminded me of, so back in 2016, Chris Matthews still had a show on MSNBC, and he was part of their election coverage when they were all freaking out about Donald Trump. I'm sure all of you guys have watched some of those wonderful compilation videos of progressives in the corporate press just losing their minds when Trump got elected. Anyway, so it just reminded me of that. So I wanted to play that video back when, and just watch, if you understand the whole tone of this is Donald Trump just got elected president and there was no way this was possible. And they've all been proven wrong about everything they've been saying for months. And literally Hitler is now the president of the United States. Here was that segment between Rachel Maddow and Chris Matthews.
Proposed was designed to change the behavior of white people, to tap into a type of white vote, an enthusiasm among white voters that was going to obliterate anything you might otherwise need to get from people of color. I mean, we do have Clinton underperforming Barack Obama with Latinos. We have Clinton underperforming Barack Obama with African Americans, although that was expected. What we've got, though, the biggest number and the biggest thing that explains how Trump could maybe win the presidency with only 29% of the Latino vote, is that he's spiked white vote. He has figured out a way to do that. And that has always been the far right's dream, that you could figure out a way to do it without minorities. In fact, you could figure out a way to do it on the backs of minorities by threatening minorities in a way that make a lot of people.
Right. So just pause it right here. So Rachel Maddow is giving you her analysis of why Donald Trump won. And you'll never guess, Rob, it's racism. And that's why. By the way, after all the numbers came out, this was 2016. The previous Republican candidate was Mitt Romney in 2012. Trump did better with blacks and Latinos than Mitt Romney did. None of this was right at all. He did better with those minority groups than Trump. Not that I hate even thinking about voting this way, but whatever. That's just the fact of the matter.
Rachel's an entertainer.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So anyway, but this is Rachel Maddow's take, of course, just the most shallow nonsense. And then every now and then, and it is kind of like, because he is always in an Irish drunken stupor, and Chris Matthews says a bunch of that, but every now and then he has like a moment of sobriety where he'll kind of be like, oh wait, no, and here's something thoughtful.
That does awaken something, basically that's racial anxiety among whites, and that's how you win. That's been a dream on the far right. It's the Ann Coulter dream of white turnout.
Well, let me give the other version of that notion, and is that the three issues that he tapped into, trade, immigration, and wars, I think he's on the popular side of. I think the country hates all these wars. The establishment in both parties has been supporting those wars, including Hillary. The fact we don't have an immigration system that we enforce. Business doesn't want one because they want the cheap labor. Democrats want the jobs and want the votes. Nobody's gotten it together. In terms of trade, the fact is, a good part of the states we're looking at tonight, just drive through Michigan, drive through Wisconsin, and you'll see places that are hollowed out. There's nothing left. There used to be a Blockbusters movie place to get videos. They're gone. Now nothing's left but the diner. That's all that's left to hold the community together. And Trump said, you know what? I think I can run against this stuff. And he put it together. And I think it was a legitimate campaign on those issues. I mean, I never heard Hillary railing against these stupid wars. I never heard Hillary railing genuinely against these trade deals. She came out against TPP at the very end, and nobody really believed it. And I never heard her really come out for a comprehensive immigration program, which included enforcement on illegal hiring, and actually put it together. Sure, she went out and got Latino votes, but did she ever come out for a sound, workable, progressive, enforceable immigration policy? No. So people saw
She did. She actually did have a comprehensive immigration policy.
Where was she on enforcement?
She was all for the Obama part of the enforcement.
For it. Did she ever campaign for it?
Yes, she did.
Did she ever campaign for it?
Yes, she did.
When did she talk about the E-Verify? When did she talk about it?
This is the one issue where she stood up to what people said she had to say to the Latino community. They wanted her to step away from Obama
continually, and I never heard her come out for the strong elements in a comprehensive immigration program. She thought she could get all the Hispanic vote without paying a price. And if you're going to have a law that works and you're going to enforce it, you have to pay a political price. And I never heard her do it.
That's what she campaigned on, was a comprehensive immigration reform. She didn't campaign on.
She said the word.
No, she campaigned on it, Chris. She did. What she didn't do was say build a wall.
No,
Mexicans are rapists.
Did she say anything about? Did she ever say stop illegal hiring in this country? Stop illegal immigration in this country? Did she ever say it?
That was her proposed policy.
I never heard her come out against illegal immigration. Did you?
You think she should have run against? She should have tried to get to Trump's right on that issue?
No, I think the country's against illegal immigration, and it's a serious. But I've never heard a country that didn't have a border, didn't have a work permit, didn't get serious about it. And I think that business wants the cheap labor and the Democrats want the votes. And that's why you know what the solution to the immigration problem is? What we have right now. That's what the Democrats want. That's what the Republicans want. What we have right now, this Michigas, this craziness. And I think that Trump took advantage of it. And I don't think it's racist.
Dude, he goes, and I don't think it's racism, by the way, was his last line there. Anyway, and just remember this little moment. And you could just see how angry it made Rachel Maddow. And then she's got to sit there and pretend that Hillary Clinton ran as a border hawk, right? She wasn't calling Donald Trump racist for running as a border hawk. She was actually a border hawk. Like, come on. But it's just like these little moments of sanity in the insane world that is MSNBC that Chris Matthews would provide sometimes. And I did like that element, at least. Don't get me wrong. I know people, please don't flip it. I know he said a ton of like awful, idiotic shit too. But I did find, I don't know why the clip that you sent me just kind of reminded me of that, where they're like, that was the thing that was a wild card about Chris Matthews. It's like every now and then he might say something like that and go, oh yeah, he actually does have a little bit of wisdom to him. Like he's been around for a while and I think he's just an old school liberal and not like one of these new woke progressives. And so he just kind of will fall back to like oh yeah, but wait a minute. What about like not being insane? How about that?
Yeah, it's amazing how just a little bit of pushback is kryptonite.
Yeah. Like their whole thing just falls apart. And now you're here arguing that actually Hillary Clinton was a border hawk. That's not what happened. And like, of course, look, I mean, like Chris Matthews is totally right that he's like, this is the thing that we've been saying for years, that Donald Trump just put together what are really popular issues. And that's it. You know? And all of the other baggage that comes along with Donald Trump, he won in spite of that, not because of that. And then it's like, yeah, who else here was railing against these stupid wars? Hillary Clinton sure never was, you know? And I think he also, you know, there was something from that clip that he still touched on in the more recent one that we played first that you sent, where he was talking about kind of like the rage and the rural rage. And there is like real truth to that you drive around the country, it's like there are towns all over the place where like the story is this used to be a great town and it's not anymore. And then those people are just constantly getting lectured and mocked by the TV news. How do you think they're going to feel about that? Obviously, they're going to support whoever the guy who's against those TV news people is. And then every day the TV news people are telling you how horrible that guy is. It just makes them want to vote for him more. That's again, it's amazing how much they still haven't learned this lesson with Donald Trump. They still all just kind of think, maybe we can get him in jail. Maybe that'll be the answer. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, longtime sponsor, and we love these guys, sheathunderwear.com, the underwear of legends. Listen, these guys at Sheath Underwear have been with us for over 3 years now. When they first signed on as a sponsor, they sent me a couple pairs of their underwear. I put them on. I loved them. I literally ordered a whole bunch more. It's the only underwear I wear now. The best pair of boxer briefs you're ever going to have. And I will tell you, I still have the original 2 pairs that they sent me, and they still feel as great as they did the first day they sent them to me. The best pair of boxer briefs you'll ever get. They got other stuff too, like shirts and hoodies and gator necks and all types of stuff. Go check them out. Not only have they been a loyal sponsor of this show, the guys who run the company are genuinely great guys, and it's an unbelievable product. It's a no-brainer for you guys. Go on over over. If you want to support this show, go support sheathunderwear.com. Get the best pair of boxer briefs you'll ever wear. And if you use the promo code problem20, you'll get 20% off your entire order. Once more, sheathunderwear.com, promo code problem20 for 20% off your next order. All right, let's get back on the show. Let's go to the Peter Strzok on MSNBC, which is that's the Tom Elliott tweet. Brian, Tom Elliott, great Twitter follow if you don't already, at Tom's Elliott.
About Michigan, that's the big news we came in on. We just talked about Maine, but I go back to the point that Joyce made earlier about the fact that there's going to have to be a unified understanding. This is not going to work if there is a patchwork of state solutions. She is thinking of that, of course, legally. That is the role we ask her to play. For you, from a security perspective, right, from a sense of people being able to get on board and say, these are the rules, whether or not you like them. This is how we are proceeding as a nation. Both your biggest concerns and sort of the best path forward here, if we are able to get to a unified understanding.
Well, my biggest concern is that we have the presumptive Republican nominee for president who has and continues to engage in calls for violence from his supporters. And look, there's an interesting data point here. Just shortly after the Michigan Supreme Court indicated they weren't going to take this up, Donald Trump took to Truth Social and lauded their decision, talked about how they were absolutely right. It would be very interesting. You know, Frank pointed out how the FBI in Colorado out of the Denver office is actively working the threats to the Colorado justices. Let's take a look at the data coming out of Michigan. Are there any threats right now to those Michigan Supreme Court justices who decided not to hear the case? Because the fact of the matter is, this isn't an environment where everybody is prone to violence. The fact of the matter is, this is an environment where adherents and supporters of the former president are engaging in threats of violence, and there's a comparative absence of any sort of like behavior on the side. You don't see supporters of Joe Biden going out and threatening Michigan Supreme Court justices.
All right,
So
let's pause it there. You don't see supporters of Joe Biden going out and threatening violence. I will agree with that. You don't see supporters of Joe Biden, period. Just don't see any. They're almost non-existent. Isn't it crazy? So by the way, if you don't know, people, this is Peter Strzok, the co-intelligence FBI agent was texting his mistress, "We will stop Donald Trump from getting into the Oval Office." That's who this guy is, right? One of the guys. So of course he gets a job at MSNBC. But isn't it unbelievable how he could just say something, and this is an FBI agent, a former FBI agent, could just say that Donald Trump is engaging in calls to violence from his supporters. Like, you just say that, and you're like, oh, okay, well then, charge him with that, right? Are you telling me that this Justice Department is unwilling to charge Donald Trump with a crime if he's committing that? Because if he's calling for violence from his supporters, that is illegal. If he's inciting violence, that's a crime. So why doesn't the Justice Department charge him with that? And it's like, oh, yeah, right. Because he's not actually. You know, say what you will about the guy. You could even argue he's being reckless or something like that. But he's not saying, I want you guys to go commit violence. And it's unbelievable that they just will say this, even though they know they have no case.
It's a bunch of incredible leaps here. Firstly, as you pointed out, the fact that this guy can be on the news as a person who wasn't part of an intelligence apparatus to unseat the last president, of which, I mean, with him and the other, isn't he directly the guy who did the false Pfizer report too, aside from the text messages?
Yes.
Yeah. So the guy violated.
He was involved in it.
Right. So I'm just saying the fact that this is a character that is allowed to be on the news and serve as an expert. Also, I mean, we've talked about it. These people they're all deep state kooks. They go from their job at CNN and MSNBC back to government. It's all the same job. But just listen to their language. This is the same as when we played that guy on Bill Maher's show after January 6th, who was talking about domestic terrorism. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking to police all of our behavior. But this is such a bullshit metric where, while I agree with your joke and it's very funny, Biden supporters aren't making threats at all because there are no Biden supporters. I've heard of other incidents of conservative judges, there were protesters on Supreme Court's lawns with the abortion cases. There are threats of violence from the left all the time. this isn't a metric for, firstly, there's like you said, it's not a crime. There's a dissociation between me saying, hey, what the government's doing to me is wrong, and then if other people are making threats of violence. I'm not the other people. Those are two separate things. That's not a metric of that. What, like, if the government illegally came to my house and yanked me out of here, paraded me through the streets naked, and then there were calls to violence against the government, well, that's a response to what the government did to me. That's not the response to what I have done.
And well, look, it's the same thing as like in the Israel situation, where they're kind of like, if you speak out against the occupation, then you're on the side of the terrorists. And you're like, well, I'm just telling you the occupation's wrong. And you're like, well, yeah, but these terrorists are attacking us. And they're like, yeah, because you're occupying them. Like, it's all just so insane. It's like, yeah, so stop doing that to them. And then and if you stop doing that to them and they were still doing it, then okay, you have a case. But that's not the case you have right now.
And also just by this metric, with all the Black Lives Matter looting, where you're going to go, oh my God, this is why we can't have black people in this country.
Right.
Because look at the violence that the African Americans that we've given all these entitlements to within our culture, and now the outrage that it's causing. There's a dissociation between the groups of people and people that are causing violence and the violence that's being caused. I don't know. It's a nonsense metric, and it's not true that the left doesn't engage in threats of violence.
And look, all of this, it's all just tap dancing around what is obviously at the heart of the matter here. And it's just this one is just so transparent, but it's just like, they just want Trump off the ballot. And that's what this has all been about. Look, they are not confident. And they're like, look, if this guy's on the ballot, he might win. And we think that's really, really bad. So we got to get him off the ballot. How do we justify that? That's the starting point. And then we work backward to some justification for why he is an insurrectionist and should be taken off of all these ballots or something like that. But, in the same way, maybe this is a way that I could kind of tie a thread through this whole episode. Let me try to see if I can do that. So, in the same way that when we were talking about Nikki Haley's answer and, the congressmen who are answering Liam in that video that he did, and how they just don't know anything, like, there is this tremendous amount of like hubris and ignorance and a profound lack of wisdom from some very powerful people in this country. And if you think about Chris Matthews' point that he made in that clip that you sent over, Rob, where he talked about how, we fought these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and this just made the people hate us even more. It's just, it's just every time you'd go over there, it's like General McChrystal, his, if you guys remember his famous, I think he called it insurgent math. And he was like, what's 10 minus 2? And, he goes, this guy's, what's 10 minus 2? And they're like 8. And he's like, no, it's 20. In insurgent math, 10, if you got a list of 10 terrorists and you killed 2 of them, now here's your new list with 20. Because of the 2 you killed, he had 3 brothers who all joined up. You know what I mean? And like so like, it's like you just pissed more people off because innocent people were killed in the strike. And now there's more and more growing out of it. You see this all over. You see this in Gaza, and you see this in all of the theaters of war where the U.S. has been over the last 20 years or so. And there's this ignorance and this hubris to some of these like powerful people where you just sit there and they're like, man, are you, for someone who is in intelligence, are you gaming this out like 2 steps ahead? Like, so let's say you get Trump off the ballot. Okay. This bullshit works, and you get him off the ballot, and so the Democrats win, whoever the nominee is, they win again. What's next? What do you think then? Those Trump supporters moderate? Is that what you think their response to that's going to be? They accept that they no longer live in a democracy and they don't get a shot at having a vote for president? Or do you think that makes them even more radical? Take a guess. And before you think that there's some wise plan here and they have thought all these steps ahead, go back to Nikki Haley's answer about the Civil War. You know what I'm saying? Like, it does seem like there are a lot of people up there there is like this tremendous atrophy in the American ruling class in large part due to 30 years of absolute power with no question to their rule. And it's just like, man, you guys are playing with fire here. I mean, what this country is going to look like if they actually succeed and take Donald Trump out, that's a big question that we should all start thinking about a lot more, because they're trying and there's a shot they're going to succeed at that. And then the question is like, what's the response to that going to be? Don't go into buildings. Yeah, avoid buildings. That's our message to you. Better safe than sorry. Just avoid buildings, any structure of any side, of any type. Okay, that's going to be our show for today. Come on out New Year's Eve, East Rutherford at the Williams Center. It's going to be a great time. Can't wait to ring in the new year with a bunch of you maniacs. And thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.